In the small, dusty town of Redstone, Mara was a name whispered in the alleyways and across sun-baked porches. The daughter of a mechanic, she grew up surrounded by the hum of engines and the sharp scent of gunpowder. But her true talent was something far quieter and far deadlier. Mara had an eye that never missed a target, and a steady hand that could hold a rifle steady even in the fiercest winds. Her skill was a secret known only to a few close friends who often dared her to shoot apples from their heads or hit distant cans stacked on rusty barrels. She never missed, and her confidence grew with each perfect shot. Yet the townsfolk dismissed her as just a talented girl, a prodigy with a rifle, but nothing more. However, Mara dreamed bigger than Redstone. She longed to prove herself not just as a shooter, but as someone who could change the tides of a battle, someone who could hold power in her hands and decide the fate of more than just a few cans on a fence. One day, as Mara sat on the cracked wooden steps of her father's workshop, the wind carried a strange whisper through the streets. A rumor had spread like wildfire from the nearby military base. A rare weapon had been spotted in the armory, the M24 sniper rifle. The rifle that soldiers only talked about in hushed tones. The one that could strike with deadly precision from over 1,000 meters away. The same rifle that was said to be worth more than a small fortune. Mara had heard stories about it from old veterans who visited the town from time to time, but none had ever seen it with their own eyes, until now. And that was when everything changed. She knew right then that she had to get that rifle. She had to prove she was worthy of it. But the military base was a fortress surrounded by barbed wire guards and cameras. No ordinary person could just walk in and claim the M24. But Mara was no ordinary person. She was cunning and fearless, and had learned to read people and situations like open books over. The next few days, Mara began to plan every detail. She studied the patrol schedules, memorized the guard shifts, and mapped out every inch of the base perimeter. She watched the soldiers come and go, noting the times when the gates were less guarded. She talked to strangers at the local tavern, gathering snippets of information about the base security and the soldiers guarding the armory. But what Mara didn't expect was that someone else was watching her too. Someone who noticed the way she lingered near the fences, the way her eyes scanned the base, and the way she kept asking questions that didn't quite seem innocent. Mara wasn't sure if it was a soldier or someone else, but the feeling of being watched grew heavier each day. The night, Mara decided. To make her move, the moon was a thin sliver in the sky, casting eerie shadows on the cracked roads. She wore dark clothes and moved silently, slipping through the alleys with the grace of a shadow. Her heart pounded, but her mind was sharp. She knew she couldn't afford any mistakes. She reached the fence where the base lights flickered above and crouched low, pulling out a set of tools she had stolen from her father's workshop. A few tense moments later, a small section of the wire mesh gave way, and Mara slipped inside. The air was thick with the scent of oil metal and something she couldn't quite place. Fear or excitement, perhaps both. She kept moving carefully through the labyrinth of buildings, her eyes searching for the armory. The base was alive with the sounds of distant footsteps, muffled voices, and the occasional bark of a guard dog. She hugged the walls, staying in the shadows, dodging patrols, until she finally found the building she was looking for. The armory stood tall with a heavy metal door guarded by a keypad lock. Mara's breath hitched, but she had anticipated this. She pulled from her pocket a small device, a crude but effective code breaker she had managed to assemble using parts scavenged from the town. It beeped softly as it connected to the keypad, lights flickering. Mara held her breath. Time seemed to stretch like an endless rope. Finally, the lock clicked, and the door creaked open. Mara slipped inside. The room was filled with rows of weapons shining under. Harsh fluorescent lights, Rifles, pistols, grenades, all lined up like soldiers waiting for battle. But Mara's eyes locked on the prize, the M24 sniper rifle resting on a rack at the far end of the room. Its sleek black body gleamed like something out of a dream. Her fingers itched to grab it, but as she took a step forward, a shadow moved near the entrance. Mara froze, heart pounding. She ducked behind a crate and held her breath. The footsteps grew louder and then stopped right in front of her. Hiding place, Mara could see a figure silhouetted against the dim light. A tall man in a uniform and a sharp gaze that seemed to pierce through the darkness. He was not just any soldier, but someone important. Someone who Mara had heard stories about. The Colonel. The man who had shocked the entire base when news of the missing M24 started to spread. Mara's mind raced. She had to make a decision quickly. But before she could move, the Colonel spoke softly, as if talking to himself or to something. Else I never thought I'd see the day someone dared to come for this rifle. But the Colonel's eyes narrowed. Mara realized she wasn't the only one with secrets in this room. What happened next would change everything, and leave Mara wondering if she was ready for the fight that was coming her way. Mara's heart pounded like a drum in the silence of the armory. As the Colonel's shadow loomed closer, every breath felt heavier. With the weight of the moment, she could barely think, her mind racing. Faster than her pulse, yet she refused to freeze. She knew that if she was going to survive this night, she had to rely on more than just luck. She had to use every skill she had honed over years of practice and secrecy. As the Colonel stepped forward, his eyes scanned the room, narrowing on the faint gleam of the M24, resting just out of her reach. Mara's fingers twitched, itching to grasp the rifle, but she stayed hidden, waiting for the perfect moment. The Colonel spoke in a low voice that seemed to fill the room like a warning. You have guts coming this far, but do you understand what you are taking? This rifle is not just metal and bullets. It carries a legacy, a power that many have died protecting, and even more have tried to steal Mara's. Mind flashed back to the stories she had heard, the whispers of missions won by a single shot, the legends of snipers who had changed the course of wars from miles away. But now those stories were no longer just tales. They were her reality. She forced herself to respond, keeping her voice steady. I want to prove that I'm worthy, that I can use it for something bigger than this town. The Colonel's expression shifted. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes before he turned away and pulled out a small device from his pocket. A flash drive with encrypted files that Mara recognized from the stolen map she had found days ago. Asterisk. The Colonel spoke again. You're more prepared than I thought, but you don't know the half of it. He pressed. A button and a screen flickered to life, showing blueprints, plans, and coordinates. Mara watched in disbelief. The information revealed a secret operation involving the M24 and a hidden threat lurking beyond the borders of their country. Mara realized this was no ordinary weapon, no ordinary mission, but a game of shadows and danger that had been unfolding long before she ever aimed her first shot. The Colonel's voice lowered as he said the rifle was part of a plan to stop a group that was gathering power, a group with resources and intentions darker than anyone imagined. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. The mission suddenly bigger than her own desire for glory. She had to decide whether to become part of something far more dangerous, or retreat into the safety of obscurity. But before she could answer, a sudden noise shattered the tense silence. Alarms blared through the base, red lights flashing like warnings from a nightmare. The Colonel cursed under his breath and barked orders into his radio. Mara knew the moment was slipping away, and her chance to escape with the rifle was running out fast. She seized the moment and bolted, grabbing the M24 with a grip that felt both foreign and perfect at once. She could hear the shouts of soldiers and the pounding of boots closing in, but she ran like the wind, her every step fueled by desperation and adrenaline. The maze of corridors twisted and turned around her, a deadly game of hide-and-seek with no promises of victory. Mara ducked into shadows, slid behind crates and leapt over obstacles, her breath ragged but her resolve unbroken. Yet even with the rifle in her hands, she knew the most dangerous challenge lay ahead. The traitor who had tipped off the base and now hunted. Her like a ghost, Mara's mind raced. Who could it be? Someone close. Someone she had trusted. Or a stranger with a deadly agenda. The fear of betrayal clawed at her. But there was no time for doubt. She had to keep moving and find a way out before the walls closed in. The deeper she ran, the more the base seemed like a labyrinth designed to trap her, every step calculated by an enemy who knew her moves before she made them. But Mara had one advantage. She understood the art of the unseen. She had been trained by necessity to move like a shadow blend with darkness and disappear when the moment was right. As she neared the exit, she heard a voice call out low and icy. A voice she never expected to hear. It was the colonel, but not the man she had met in the armory. This was different, cold and commanding. You cannot escape with that rifle. Mara stopped dead. Her heart caught in her throat. Was he friend or foe in this deadly game? The colonel's figure emerged from the shadows, and Mara realized that nothing in this night was as it seemed. The real battle was only beginning, and the secrets hidden in the rifle were about to unravel, revealing truths that would shake Mara to her core and change everything she thought she knew about loyalty, power, and the price of a single bullet. The hallway stretched before her like a trap disguised as freedom, the cold cement walls whispering secrets she was never meant to hear. Mara gripped the M24 tighter. Every part of her body aching from the sprint, from the chase, from the weight of what she now carried, not just the weapon, but the truth it held and the fear it awakened behind her. The colonel's voice still echoed, not as a warning, but as a command, that carried something darker than authority. It carried betrayal, and that betrayal bled into every corner of the base, as if the walls themselves were turning against her. She moved fast, her breath shallow, her ears tuned to every footstep and every click of a safety being released behind steel doors as soldiers swept the corridors with mechanical precision, searching for the intruder who had stolen something sacred. Mara knew she had only minutes, maybe seconds, before she would be surrounded, unless she could vanish. But this base wasn't designed for ghosts. It was designed to cage them still. She darted through side corridors, back rooms, and stairwells, always one step ahead, always just a little faster than the hand reaching for her shoulder. The rifle felt alive in her hands, as if it recognized her, as if it knew its purpose had not been fulfilled in the dusty armory. But somewhere far from here, where its power would shift the outcome of something none of these guards could comprehend, yet with every second passing, Mara realized that escaping with it might not be enough. Not when someone inside the base had orchestrated the trap. Not when the colonel had lied to her, or perhaps not lied, but twisted the truth until it became something else. Something toxic. She slipped into an old storage wing where the lights flickered above crates of decommissioned equipment and rusted lockers, and paused for the first time since the alarm had gone off, catching her breath, trying to make sense of what she had seen. The blueprints, the files, the map of something larger than any single mission, and the name she had seen etched into one of the documents, Operation Wavelength, a name she had never heard, but that now burned into her memory like a warning, a name that hinted at war, at silence, at targets miles away, and at something coming closer. Footsteps echoed in the distance, steady and purposeful. Not the random pattern of soldiers sweeping an area, but the confident rhythm of someone who knew exactly where to go and that someone was coming for her. Mara tucked herself behind a crate, heart-hammering finger resting on the trigger, not ready to kill but ready to survive. As the steps grew louder, she tried to remember. Every hallway, every exit she had memorized. But this wing wasn't part of her plan. It was off the map, unused, forgotten. But maybe that was why she was still breathing. Maybe that was why the hunter hadn't yet seen her. Then the voice returned, not shouted, but spoken clear and sharp from just beyond the crate. "You're clever, girl, but not clever enough to outrun your own shadow." And then silence, heavy, thick, suffocating. Mara stayed still, praying. He would keep talking, give something away, and he did. "I should have ended this before you touched that rifle, but I wanted to see if you could find it. If you would be brave enough or stupid enough. Now I have my answer." She didn't recognize the voice anymore, not the man who had once looked at her with cautious respect. This was someone else, or maybe this had always been who he was. Someone who played a long game, someone who used people like tools. Mara moved slow, silent, inching toward a narrow ventilation shaft near the floor. It was small, too small for most, but maybe just big enough for her. She reached it, fingertips brushing the edge when her foot knocked against a metal pipe, and the noise shot through the room like a gunshot. The silence broke. A bootstep lunged toward her, and Mara dove into the shaft, dragging the rifle in with her, scraping her elbows and knees against the sharp edges, crawling forward as fast as she could, with adrenaline drowning out the pain behind her hands, clawed at the opening too large to fit. Too late to stop her, but close enough to fill the narrow space with shouted threats and promises. "You don't know what you're holding, girl. You don't know who will come for it or what they'll do to you when they find out what you've stolen." Crawled deeper through the vent, the echo of his words chasing her until it blended with her own thoughts. Did she know what she was holding? Was this rifle really meant for her? Or had she just walked into a trap so carefully laid that even her escape was part of the plan? The question lingered as she finally dropped out into the shadows behind the outer wall of the base, wind rushing over her skin, and the desert stretching before her like a battlefield waiting for its first shot. She ran, across open ground, lungs burning, knowing the guards would regroup, knowing drones would soon take to the sky, but she also knew something else. Someone had left a path for her. Not the colonel, but someone before him. Someone who had vanished long ago, but left pieces behind, clues, maps, circuits, and a key she now wore on a chain around her neck, taken from a locker marked only with a name and a number, 09 Ren. That name meant something. Something she couldn't explain yet, but it burned with the same intensity as the rifle she carried. Hours passed as she navigated dry ravines and silent cliffs, moving under cover of darkness and stars, until she reached the hidden shack marked on the old map. Its door half buried in sand, its frame weathered. By years of wind and sun inside was dust silence, and then a single red light blinking on a terminal that pulsed when she stepped inside, as if it had been waiting for her. Mara approached slowly, the rifle slung across her back. Her breath quiet. Now her thoughts louder than ever. The screen flickered to life and text scrolled across it. "Welcome, Ren. Authorization confirmed." And with those words, her world shifted again. Ren had not been a man. Ren had been a code name, a designation passed down and now inherited by her. Whether by fate or design, she didn't know. But what she did know was that she had not just stolen a weapon, she had awakened something bigger, and the people it threatened would stop at nothing to silence her to reclaim what she now held, and somewhere out there, they were already moving closer, ready to strike. The red glow from the terminal bathed the room in a dim, pulsing light that seemed to match the rhythm of Mara's heartbeat, steady, relentless, and impossible to ignore. She stood frozen in the middle of the shack, the air heavy with dust, and the weight of 1,000 questions racing through her mind. How had the system recognized her as Ren, who had set this up so many years ago? And why had the M24 been the key to unlocking it all? The terminal clicked once and then again, as if waking from a long sleep, before it displayed a map, a series of locations marked in red, with one blinking brighter than the rest. A location far beyond the border, deep within. a mountainous region long rumored to be the graveyard of failed missions and lost soldiers. Mara stared at it knowing that whatever was there, it was the next step. It was where she had to go, not because she wanted to, but because everything had led her to this moment, and somewhere deep inside, she felt it. The certainty that this rifle, this identity, and this mission were no longer about proving herself. They were about stopping something that had been set in motion years ago by people, whose names had been erased from records and whose shadows still moved in the dark. She gathered what little supplies she could find in the shack, a field pack half full with dried rations and a battered scope attachment that clicked perfectly onto the M24, as if waiting all this time for her to find it, and then without looking back, she stepped into the desert, her eyes on the horizon and her path set in silence. The journey took 3 days, through blistering heat and bitter cold, through canyons that whispered ancient warnings and hills where broken metal bones of forgotten machines still littered the ground. Mara traveled mostly by night, guided by the stars and the map, etched now into her mind, each step bringing her closer to the truth, and farther from the girl she had once been. The soldier she was becoming did not flinch at the howls of distant creatures or the glint of movement in the rocks above, because she had learned now that fear was not the enemy, but the fuel. It was the thing that kept her sharp, kept her alive. Asterisk. On the 4th day, just before dawn, Mara reached the edge of the mountain. Marked on the terminal screen, a towering formation of jagged stone and shadow, with a narrow entrance partially collapsed, as if someone had tried to bury it long ago. She squeezed through a gap and found herself in a tunnel that led deeper into darkness, and as she moved forward, the temperature dropped. The silence deepened, and the sense of being watched returned stronger. Than ever she could feel the weight of eyes, not human, not animal, but something else, something patient. Asterisk. The tunnel opened into a wide chamber where ancient technology still pulsed faintly embedded in the walls, blinking slowly like a heartbeat, barely. Alive in the center stood a black table, and on it a single device shaped like a rifle stock, but carved with symbols she did not understand. Mara approached slowly, and when she touched it, the room came alive, lights snapping on around her, revealing the full scope of what had been hidden here, a forgotten command center untouched for decades, maps lining the walls, digital displays frozen in time, and in the far corner, a chair turned toward the wall. Asterisk. She approached it cautiously, the rifle ready in her hands, and when she reached it, she stopped cold. In the chair sat a man, or what had once been a man, now little more than a husk of flesh and bone, clad in a uniform that bore the Wren insignia and a patch that matched the